Welcome back to CPAC Now, America Uncanceled. I'm Matt Schlapp, along with
Mercy Schlapp. Great to be with you all. There's been such breaking news happening on Capitol Hill. We want to bring you the latest of what's happening there, and the best person, one of the best people we can bring on our show today, Chairman Jim Banks. He's from the great state of Indiana with a 95% ACU rating, which, as you know, for Matt, that just makes his heart just pitter patter. But we really have some serious things going on the Hill. Chairman Banks, thanks for joining us.
Hey, good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
What is going on in Capitol Hill? What is Queen Pelosi doing these days?
Well, it's obvious, and it's what we said. It's what we said all along, that this January 6th committee is all politics. It's a stunt by the Democrats. We said that. That's why all of us, but two of us on the Republican side, voted against the select committee. But when Nancy Pelosi rejected me and Jim Jordan yesterday from the committee, she proved it, and she proved it to every American, Republican, Democrat, to the mainstream and the left-wing media. They can't deny it. This thing is entirely a political sham to drag Donald Trump through the mud, to drag Republican members of Congress through the mud, and to drag 75 million Americans who voted for Donald Trump through the mud. They don't want to talk. Democrats don't want to talk about rising crime waves around the country. They don't want to talk about inflation being on the rise. They don't want to talk about the crisis at the border. They will do anything to distract from that. And that's why they'll talk about Donald Trump and January 6th every day between now and the midterm election. Instead, that's what this is all about. Nancy Pelosi knew that Jim Jordan and I were already set out on a path to ask the tough questions about why the Capitol was vulnerable on January 6th, when we had intelligence for three weeks prior to January 6th that told us something dangerous would happen that day. And at the top of the food chain, above the leadership of the Capitol Police, is the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. And she knew that we were on a path to ask tough questions that she does not want to answer, that distract from the message that she wants to get out as she uses this for political purposes instead.
I think we have a clip here. Yesterday, you, Jim Jordan, Kevin McCarthy tried to explain the insanity of the moment. Let's watch for a second here.
Thank you, Jim. The leader and Jim are exactly right. This has always been about politics, and today's actions of the Speaker just confirm that. But frankly, and I've said this before, what else are they going to talk about? I mean, they're so focused on the January 6th committee. What else are they going to talk? Are they going to talk about crime? The fact that crime is up in every major urban area in this country. They're going to talk about the border crisis. I mean, think about this. March was the highest month on record for illegal crossings until April. April was the highest month on record until May. May was the highest month on record until June. Can't talk about that. They're going to talk about inflation. They're going to talk about the fact that the price of eggs is up, the price of milk is up, the price of bread is up, the price of gas is up, the price of an airline ticket is up, the price of the price of everything is up. They can't talk about that. So they're going to be partisan, and they're going to focus on this. But as the leader said, and as Mr. Banks said, I don't think they're going to address the fundamental question. The fundamental question of why wasn't there a proper security presence at the Capitol that day? They're not going to address that. And only one person can answer that question. Only one. Speaker of the United States House of Representatives. My hunch is the reason they don't want to address that question, my hunch is because what happened all last year? The Democrats normalized anarchy. They normalized rioting and looting. And when rioters and looters attacked our law enforcement personnel, when rioters and looters destroyed small businesses, what did Democrats do? They went out and raised money to bail them out of jail, and they continue to talk about defunding the police, and in fact did that in all these major urban areas, which is why crime is up.
Jim Banks, I get the fact that Jim Jordan is maybe the most hated Republican by all Democrats because of his role in these pushing back on these investigations and stuff. You've been in Congress a shorter period of time. You're the chairman of the Republican Study Committee. You're a solid conservative. But why does Nancy Pelosi hate you so much?
It's a good question, Matt. I mean, by the way, I wear it as a badge of honor to be in the same line as Jim Jordan, right? And Nancy Pelosi's hatred as she attacked. Also, at the same time, Liz Cheney to come out and attack Jim Jordan and I yesterday. But Nancy Pelosi knows that we were going down, as I said, going down a path that no one has gone down yet. And And that scared her. She was spooked by that. I called Benny Thompson, the chairman of this committee, 2 days ago after Kevin McCarthy asked me to take on this task. And I started asking him a series of questions on the phone after I introduced myself and told him I was looking forward to working with him about whether or not Republicans would be able to call witnesses to the committee next Tuesday, whether or not Republicans would have would have resources to hire staff. He hemmed and hawed. He couldn't answer any of my questions. And from that moment, now in hindsight, I should have realized that they had no interest in working with Republicans to begin with. But at that point, they too understood that we were going to take this very seriously. Jim Jordan and I and the others weren't going to allow this to become the political stunt that they wanted it to be, and that's why they fired us. They knew that we were going to ask the tough questions that would have disrupted their plans to turn this into a political circus to beat up on Republicans, and ultimately that's why she fired us.
It sounds to me like Speaker Pelosi really wants to just have her yes men around her, and the excuse she's giving is that there was a widespread Democratic dismay about statements made and actions taken by these members. This includes you. I'd love to go back to her statements and see what she has said. What's your reaction to Speaker Pelosi saying that it is because of your statements and your actions that you are disqualified from being on the January 6th committee?
Yeah, of course, no one, by the way, in the media who was at her press conference today or yesterday has challenged her on what are you talking about, Speaker Pelosi? What comments did Congressman Banks or Congressman Jordan say that disqualified them from being serious members of the January 6th Commission? She can't answer that because she doesn't know. She's making that up. That's her excuse. At the end of the day, she's just afraid of Jim Jordan and I asking tough questions. She put people on the committee who would do what she told them to do. That's why she picked Liz Cheney to be on this committee. She picked Liz Cheney to be on the committee because Liz Cheney will do what Speaker Pelosi tells her to do and take this down a path that they want to take it down to attack Republicans. They don't want to answer questions about why the Capitol was vulnerable on January 6th, why there was a disintegration at the highest levels of the Capitol Police and of the security that day that left the Capitol vulnerable to the attack that happened. I'll tell you, yesterday, right before I got the news that Speaker Pelosi rejected me to be the Republican lead on this committee, I was meeting with the head of the Capitol Police Union, the man who represents the rank and file men and women, the heroes that make up the Capitol Police that work hard every day to protect me, my staff, and my family. And the Capitol Police Union chief told me that on January 6th, even though there was intelligence that was never shared with them, they weren't prepared. Capitol Police officers were not prepared for what was going to happen by their leadership. The Capitol Police officers weren't trained for what was going to happen on January 6th, and they weren't equipped for what was going to happen. He told me that the rioters had better gear than the Capitol Police officers did. So who is responsible for that? The leadership of the Capitol Police is responsible for that. And who does the leadership of the Capitol Police report to? They report to the Speaker of the House. And that's a direction and a path that Nancy Pelosi does not want to go down because she knows that ultimately that pins a lot of blame on her for what happened that day. And she wants to make this about something entirely different.
You know, this whole idea that the Speaker has ultimate control and who can serve on this commission plays into the fact that one of your colleagues isn't allowed to serve on committees. I've been around this town a long time. You have Democratic members who haven't paid their taxes for years and years and years. You had Democratic members who had sexual relationships with pages. You've had Democratic members who were impeached in previous public offices. All of them were allowed to serve on thear committees. The idea that the Speaker of the House would take away the minority's ability to pick who is on this commission, this kind of stuff has never happened before.
It's unprecedented. Kevin McCarthy called the House of Representatives historian yesterday and confirmed that this has never happened before. Never before in the history of Congress has the leader of one party submitted names for a committee, for a select committee, and for those names to be rejected. It's never happened before. And but by the way, I served my country in uniform. I served my country in Afghanistan. I was elected by my district in Northeast Indiana now for the third time to represent my district in Congress. And for the Speaker of the House to reject me from serving as the ranking member on a select committee just goes to show you that she has way too much power, and she's abused that power. And it motivates every Republican. I'll tell you what, she did a favor to Republicans yesterday because she fired up Republicans, unlike I've seen them yet even this year.
It's true. Sweetheart, let me just bring up, Congressman, let me bring up one other thing. I mean, this is what drives me crazy. Bernie Sanders can be chairman of the Budget Committee, a socialist who doesn't believe there should be any limit on spending. Ronald Red Dellums, who was basically called Red because of his coziness to communism, was able to chair the House Armed Services Committee. We've never gotten in the way of them serving. We believe they're allowed to elect who they want to elect. That's called democracy.
Right.
And yet they are basically telling the people in your district in Indiana, Jim Banks, that somehow you're not really qualified to serve.
You're not qualified, Jim, but apparently Liz Cheney is qualified to serve. What is your reaction to, Liz Cheney? I know I worked with her a bit when I was at the White House, and I have to tell you, I'm so disappointed on how she's turned on every single one of her colleagues and is really buying into the Pelosi propaganda. What are your thoughts?
She's not the same Liz Cheney that came to Congress with me as freshman after the 2016 election. She's a very different Liz Cheney. And yesterday I was struck by she held a press conference after votes yesterday, after the speaker made this announcement that she was rejecting me and Jim Jordan. And for a while I thought, by the way, that she was going to have a press conference and say, this is obviously a political sham. I'm going to remove my name from this committee. She didn't do that. She did the opposite. She doubled down and she attacked me and Jim Jordan and Leader McCarthy and said she supported Speaker Pelosi's decision and her power not to seat me and Jim Jordan on the committee. Now, what's interesting and ironic about that is way back in February, she stood with Marjorie Taylor Greene, Liz Cheney did. She stood with Marjorie Taylor Greene and said the Speaker of the House doesn't have the power and the Democrats don't have the power not to seat a Republican member in the minority to a committee. So she said that back in February. She stood up for Marjorie Taylor Greene, but she hates me and Jim Jordan so much that she supported Nancy Pelosi's decision to reject us from this committee. It just goes to show.
She also said, Congressman,
she also on Donald Trump.
She also said something that I thought was even more distasteful. She actually accused Kevin McCarthy of violating his oath and not being a responsible person to be in line to the presidency where he become the Speaker of the House. I mean, that she needs to apologize for that immediately.
It's unbecoming and unfortunate for her to say that. Kevin McCarthy, by the way, is going to be the best Speaker of the House that I think we've had in modern times when he becomes the Speaker after the midterm elections. So, and by the way, that's what's unfortunate about this. This is bad precedent that Speaker Pelosi, terrible precedent, dangerous precedent that Speaker Pelosi is creating. Kevin McCarthy, when he becomes the Speaker, is going to have to clean up a lot of that bad precedent.
Before we wrap up, just quickly, what's going to happen next?
Well, we're not giving up. I want to make that very clear. I mean, Leader McCarthy, myself, and the other 4 members that he selected met yesterday after Speaker Pelosi rejected us. And Kevin McCarthy made the right call by saying we're not going to legitimize this process by Republicans participating. If you don't take Jim Jordan and Jim Banks, then we're not going to submit a list of names at all. So, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to continue to ask these tough questions. And I don't know what that will look like. Leader McCarthy will determine what perhaps some kind of a committee that we set up on our side, a task force of sorts. There are tough questions that have to be asked and answers that have to be demanded about what happened at the Capitol that day so that we can make sure it never happens again. It starts with examining the complete breakdown of leadership at the highest ranks of the Capitol Police, the disintegration of security that day. Those are the issues that we need to look into more, and we're going to continue to do that.
Well, Chairman Jim Banks, we appreciate you joining us. We appreciate you standing there to make the case. Just because you're not on the commission doesn't mean that your voice isn't still critically important in this process, and we're glad that you're going to stay engaged. Thanks for joining us on CPAC Now America Uncanceled. Have a safe flight back to Indiana, a great state where I went to college, and we'll be right back after this short break.
Thank you.
supported what would have been the very best option, which was a bipartisan independent commission. The minority leader opposed that. He lobbied against it in the Senate, and the Senate blocked it. The American people deserve to know what happened. The people who did this must be held accountable. There must be an investigation that is nonpartisan, that is sober, that is serious, that gets to the facts wherever they may lead. And at every opportunity, the minority leader has attempted to prevent the American people from understanding what happened, to block this investigation. Today, the Speaker objected to 2 Republican members. She accepted 3 others. She objected to 2, one of whom may well be a material witness to events that led to that day, that led to January 6th. The other, who disqualified himself by his comments in particular over the last 24 hours, demonstrating that he is not taking this seriously. He is not dealing with the facts of this investigation, but rather viewed it as a political platform.
I just can't believe that's Liz Cheney. That's not the Liz Cheney I worked with during my time at the White House. I'm just shocked that she would really betray so many of her colleagues.
The whole point of the commission on 1/6 is not to find out what happened, right? The whole point from Pelosi's standpoint is to hang this concept that Republicans are domestic terrorists around their neck.
Insurrectionists.
Insurrectionists.
Yes. Yep.
As Don Lemon said on CNN, the worst attack on our Capitol in 200 years, which is outrageous. The number of violent things that happen on the Capitol on an annual basis,
right.
Rack up. So, but this is their line because they can't talk about any public policy that's working.
No.
And so what she's doing is actually helping Nancy Pelosi hold on to the majority.
I know. It's really disgraceful. And I got to tell you, I think she's going to be definitely one of the many Democrats, but she's one of the targets that I think the Republicans will find an alternative there for her seat.
I think she almost is it's almost like a kamikaze mission.
Yeah. But why is she doing that?
Well, I think...
What is it? I don't understand.
I think that for some of these Washington, D.C. Republicans is they hated Trump, but they went along with Trump. But they always had kind of like this bitter feeling about Trump.
Right.
And they were always looking at that moment. And when he lost the election, they're like, we can finally get Trump off the stage. And then 1/6 happened. And I think politically they thought this is the nail in the coffin for Trump. And it just hasn't turned out to be. And also there's a lot of people between Liz Cheney and the speakership, and that's her ultimate desire. Remember, she bypassed running for the Senate because she wants that gavel. She wants to be the first Republican female speaker.
Well,
and there's a lot of people in the way.
Chances.
Yeah, but
It's
the only way that was going to happen is if she could find a way to get Kevin McCarthy, Jim Jordan, and all these people off the stage as well. She just has a bad political barometer because exactly the opposite has happened. And it is, look, it's a tragedy, but by the same token, it's like, it's good riddance.
Yeah,
we've got to realize
goodbye.
the game we're in. We're fighting socialists and propaganda and lying.
Right.
We need Republicans who will take on that fight.
Yeah, I can't believe that she's Liz Cheney's making the commission her basically her big issue.
She's helping the Democrats give Iran a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
She's helping the Democrats in their policy to weaken Israel. She's helping the Democrats with all of this crazy radical agenda, and it's
sad
wrong.
to watch. But we've also had another issue on Capitol Hill. This actually broke yesterday. We were hoping CPAC with a couple of other organizations, including Bienvenido USA and as well as the Republican National Hispanic Assembly. We were putting together this Cuba Libre rally that was scheduled for Thursday at 10:30 a.m. and it was canceled due to these First Amendment restrictions at the U.S. Capitol. Matt, you addressed this in a tweet. You mentioned also that we will be reapplying for a permit. America's Capitol must once again be a place where freedom lovers assemble.
Yeah, this is very important. The First Amendment, we know it's under attack. Our freedom of religion is under attack, and this ability to assemble is under attack. So because this whole propaganda around 1/6 is that all Trump supporters are domestic terrorists, they're insurrectionists, as you said, sweetheart, they are pushing back on this idea that we should be able to have this Cuba Libre rally. And they didn't really say no, but they never said yes. And eventually, if you're going to put on a rally, you got to build a stage.
Yeah,
and
you
got to
invite
promote
people and everything else.
We're being canceled by no one kind of giving us a straight answer. Now, we've got another application in the process with Mario Diaz-Balart, and Kevin McCarthy in conjunction with the groups you mentioned. Hopefully we'll get a yes today. We'll keep you posted. If we get another kind of non-yes, which is essentially a cancellation, there's going to be hell to pay, including hiring lawyers and everything else.
Yeah.
This is unacceptable. We pay our taxes. It's our capital too. The capitals shouldn't only be accessible to a bunch of renegade Texas legislators who, by the way, have COVID, running around having their rallies. We should be able to stand for human rights.
That's right. And right now, if you're a pedestrian, you can walk your dog, you can go all through that area in the Capitol. But if you want to peacefully assemble, they're making it very, very difficult. And I think you made a great point. Now that they've taken down the physical fences, now Nancy Pelosi has put up these invisible fences. And we should be able to come together and let our government know that action needs to be taken to make sure that we support the Cuban people who are fighting for freedom. But
Amen.
I know. Well, we'll see what happens. We'll keep you posted, of course. We love, love, love that you're supporting this show. It's just been amazing. It's only getting bigger and bolder. And please tell your friends and families to watch. You know, you can watch anytime on conservative.org. And remember to follow us at CPAC, at MSchlapp, at Mercedes Schlapp. I promise you, we'll keep you wildly entertained. So you don't have to watch like Netflix and all those other crazy leftist live streaming channels. But thank you again for joining us. Good night and God bless America.